from the intelligence community, where there are no indictments that have been issued against the intelligence community based upon the statements that you have made, to see whether or not they're violating the law, and they refuse to give this committee the information about how many people have been caught up in that. And it's been stonewalled by the intelligence community, saying, well, we just can't do it. Why can't the intelligence community get some geek over at Best Buy and have them come in and answer that question with a few little taps into the big computer system? We just want the number.
The time of the gentleman has expired. The witness may answer the question.
As I explained, Congressman, I've heard Director Coates explain this, and he's better positioned than I.
So we don't know. Still don't know. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chair, thanks, gentlemen. The gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Gutierrez, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask you about sexual assault by the President of the United States of America. Over the past few days, echoing previous allegations made against the President in the past several years, at least 16 women have come forward to say that the President of the United States felt them up, kissed them without permission, put his hands under their clothing without permission, groped them, touched their genitalia, walked into dressing rooms unannounced to see them naked, and made other unwanted sexual advances that to everyone are clear violations of the law. Now, I believe the women, and I generally give the women and their word a lot of weight. And when the him in question is Donald Trump, there really should be no further discussion, because as everybody, regardless of their political affiliations or partisanship, can clearly see, we have a man in the presidency who has a very difficult relationship with the truth. In this case, we have women who were made to feel powerless and insignificant, who at great personal cost and risk have come forward. And I believe them. I do. Al Franken is resigning from the Senate. And it goes no further than this committee, where 2 senior members resigned because women came forward and made credible claims. That just happened last week. And others on this dais right now are among the additional members of the body who are credibly accused of misconduct. Right now, with the number 2 person in the Justice Department before a committee and sworn to tell the truth, I think it's important to get your opinion on whether there are grounds for a criminal investigation or an ethics investigation against the President of the United States of America. For example, Rachel Crooks is one of the 16 women that we know of who have come forward. She said that President Trump, before he was president, quote, kissed me directly on the mouth. It was so inappropriate, he thought I was so insignificant that he could do that, end quote. Jill Harth, another one of the 16 women, said, quote, he groped me, he absolutely groped me, and he just slipped his hand there touching my private parts, end quote. Now, these are just 2 examples of unwelcome sexual advances. I think were he on the subway or in a restaurant, would not either or both of these incidents be enough to get him arrested? In your experience as the number 2 most important law enforcement officer in the United States? But before you answer that, how about these cases? Christian Anderson in an interview said, quote, the person on my right, who unbeknownst to me at the time was Donald Trump, put their hand up my skirt. He did touch my vagina through my underwear, end quote. And Cassandra Cyril said he continually groped my ass and invited me to his hotel room, end quote. These are very serious allegations of crimes committed by the President, are they not? But before you answer the question, I think it's important to point out that these stories are corroborated by one of the most important witnesses of all. The President himself corroborates this. He told TV host Billy Bush when he was mic'd up for an interview with Entertainment Tonight, quote, I just start kissing them. It's like a magnet, just kiss. I don't even wait. And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything. You continued, said, grab him by, and you know what he said. You can do anything, end quote. Samantha Hovley said on national television that when she was a contestant in a beauty contest, Trump would come back unannounced to the dressing room. And she tells her story, and once again, we have audio tape of the President corroborating this account when he told Howard Stern, well, quote, I'll tell you, the funny is is that before a show, I'll go backstage and everyone's getting dressed and everything else, and no men are anywhere, but I'm allowed to go in because I'm the owner. And he went on to say, the chicks will be almost naked, end quote. Mr. Rosenstein, I see you as a law enforcement officer, and I value your opinion on these matters. Would it be appropriate for you to investigate these and other allegations of assault and unwanted sexual advances by the President of the United States?
Congressman, I am happy to take any questions regarding oversight of the Department of Justice. With regard to that matter, any other allegation that you think warrants investigation, I would invite you to submit the evidence, and the department will review it if you believe there's a federal crime. That applies to any alleged violation by any person, and that's all I have to say about that.
But, Mr. Rosenstein, you're the #2 top law enforcement officer in the nation. Let me ask you, if a person on a train went and kissed a woman, is that a crime?
If it's a federal crime, a federal train, it might be a federal crime, Congressman.
Say it's Amtrak.
Just not going to answer any.
Say it's Amtrak.
Wouldn't be appropriate for me to answer any.
Wouldn't be appropriate? You think that it's, as a #2 law enforcement officer, you don't think it's a crime for a woman to be on a train, to be in a restaurant sitting, and a stranger, unwanted stranger, would come up to her and grope her and kiss her, that's not a crime?
So if you ask me,
The time of the gentleman has
crime,
expired. The witness may answer the question.
I would have to know the facts, and I'd have to evaluate the law. I've never prosecuted a case like that in federal court, Congressman. But if you have an allegation by any person at any time, you should feel free to submit it.
The women have made the allegation.
The time of the gentleman has
Listen to
expired.
them,
The chair
believe them.
recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Marino, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Deputy Attorney General, it's good to see you again.
Thank you.
We did a lot of good work together over the years.
Yes, sir.
And I'm proud of it, and I'm still proud to tell people that I was part of the Justice Department. I have a strong bias for the Justice Department. I know your character. I know what kind of man you are, and I have the most confidence in you that you will direct that agency, rule of law, and to see that everything is above board. 99% of the 0.99 of the people that I worked with there are good, honest law enforcement. I have ultimate respect for them. They helped me in many cases, even when I was a DA. I would like to ask you to clarify a procedure. And first of all, would you tell me if I'm right here? Special counsel is appointed by the Attorney General, or under the circumstances by you, and that special counsel reports to you.
Correct.
Am I correct in saying that an independent counsel is again appointed by the Attorney General or you, but that counsel is independent and not report to anyone in the essence of, can I do A, B, or C? Is that correct?
Under the independent counsel statute that lapsed in 1999, the appointment would actually be made by a federal judge, so there would be no role for the department in the selection or oversight.
DOJ wouldn't be involved in it at all.
Correct.
Good. Let's talk a moment about, I've been in many interviews with FBI agents, DEA agents, concerning potential cases. And what I've seen handled was above board, but would you explain to the committee what a 302 is?
Yes, a 302 is simply the form number for an FBI interview report. So after conducting a witness interview, an FBI agent would write a summary of the interview, and we refer to that as a Form 302.
And during that, during an interview, whether it's done by attorneys or investigators at the Department of Justice, or it's done back in my district in the middle of Pennsylvania, at some point, is there usually an assistant U.S. attorney present in those interviews?
There's no rule against it, Congressman, but typically not. I would say the majority of interviews would be conducted by two agents without a prosecutor.
Who makes the final determination on whether immunity is granted? It's not by the U.S. attorney or the attorney at Justice Department who could perhaps be handling that case?
That's correct. It would be a prosecutor who would need to make that determination, and depending upon what type of immunity, it might require a higher level of review.
And before any immunity is given to anyone, whether it's absolute or not, we in law enforcement look for a proffer. Is that correct? From that individual or their attorney? What are you going to tell us that why should we give you immunity?
We have a strong preference for obtaining a proffer prior to any grant of immunity. We don't always do it, but we have a strong preference for it.
I have never been in a situation, and perhaps it's not unique, where immunity has been given where there has not been a proffer. Is that, would that be an extreme, unusual situation where someone would say, get their immunity, but we have no idea what they're going to say?
I wouldn't want to characterize it, Congressman, as a U.S. attorney. I had to approve formal immunity, and in the majority of the cases, there had been a proffer. If there wasn't a proffer, I typically would ask why. So I can't characterize what percentage of cases might fall into that category.
And also, any evidence that would be collected, such as laptops, computers, things of that nature, pursuant to the investigation. Again, there would be a thorough investigation of that equipment before immunity would be given to someone.
It would depend upon the circumstances, Congressman. We'd have to make a determination of whether we believed what was the data might be relevant to the decision.
Right. But there is we just don't give blanket immunity because someone asked for it, or just to get them in to talk.
We should not give immunity just because somebody asked for it, correct?
That's all I have. Thank you very much for being here, and I know you will keep an eye on things and keep everything above board. It's a pleasure to see you again. I yield back.
Likewise. Thank you.
I thank the gentleman. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Deutsch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here. There's been a lot of talk about dates and timelines. I'd like to actually just walk through, for the benefit of my colleagues, just a short timeline from this year. In January, the FBI, CIA, and NSA concluded the following, and I quote, "We assess Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered an influence campaign in 2016 aimed at the U.S. presidential election. Russia's goals were to undermine public faith in the U.S. democratic process, denigrate Secretary Clinton, and harm her electability and potential presidency. We further assess Putin and the Russian government developed a clear preference for President-elect Trump," close quote. Mr. Rosenstein, do you have any reason to dispute that?
No.
In January, January 24th, Michael Flynn denied to the FBI agents that he discussed U.S. sanctions with Russia before he took office. On January 26th, Acting Attorney General Sally Yates told the White House counsel that Flynn lied about the nature of his calls with Kislyak and is vulnerable to blackmail. On February 13th of this year, Flynn resigned over his conversations with the vice president. On February 15th, public reports of telephone records that show that members of the Trump campaign and other Trump associates had repeated contacts with senior Russian intelligence officials in the year before the election. On March 16th, documents released by Representative Cummings show that Flynn received $33,750 from Russia's state-owned TV for a speech that he made in Moscow. On March 20th, the FBI director acknowledged an investigation into possible collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. On May 9th, the president fired the FBI director. On May 10th, Trump met with Russian diplomats in the White House and revealed classified information and told them that he fired the head of the FBI, called him a nut job, and said, and I quote, "I face great pressure because of Russia. That's taken off," close quote. On May 11th, the president told NBC News that the Russia thing with Trump and Russia is a made-up story. On June 7th, we learned President Trump urged Comey to drop the Flynn investigation. On July 8th, we learned of an undisclosed Trump Tower meeting between Donald Trump Jr., Jared Kushner, Paul Manafort, and a Russian lawyer. The next day, 5 sources stated that Donald Trump Jr. agreed to the meeting on the premise that damaging information on Hillary Clinton would be provided. And 5 days after that, a veteran of the Russian military, we learned, also attempted that Trump Tower meeting with Donald Trump Jr., Paul Manafort, and Jared Kushner. On October the 5th, George Papadopoulos, one of 5 people the president identified as a policy advisor, pleaded guilty to one count of making a false statement to the FBI on January 27th about the timing, extent, and nature of relationships and interactions with certain foreign nationals. In the statement of offense, we learned that he reached out regarding his connections, that he could help arrange a meeting between Trump and Putin. On October 27th, former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort and campaign advisor Rick Gates were indicted on multiple counts, including conspiracy against the United States. In November, the President of the United States met with Vladimir Putin and said, and I quote, "He said he didn't meddle. He said he didn't meddle. I asked him again. You can only ask so many times. Every time he sees me, he says, I didn't do that, and I really believe that. When he tells me that, he means it." The President went on to say, I mean, give me a break, talking about the national security folks who put together that report that I quoted earlier. Give me a break. They are political hacks. On December 1st, former National Security Advisor Mike Flynn pleaded guilty to one count of making a false statement to the FBI about conversations he had with the Russian ambassador regarding sanctions. This is a little walk through what happened over the past year. I would like to ask you, Mr. Rosenstein, I'd like to quote some of my colleagues from this committee. One of them said that the special counsel's investigation into whether the Trump campaign assisted in its effort to interfere in the election is actually an attempt to overthrow the government of the United States. Do you believe that, Mr. Rosenstein?
No.
He said we're at risk of a coup d'etat in this country if we allow an unaccountable person. Is the special counsel unaccountable here?
No, he's not unaccountable.
He went on to say with no oversight. Is there no oversight at all of the special counsel?
There is oversight.
And then he went on to say that if we allow an unaccountable person with no oversight to undermine the duly elected president of the United States, is pursuing the rule of law undermining the duly elected president of the United States, Mr. Rosenstein?
No, it is not.
One of my other colleagues said we've got to clean this town up. He talked about firing Mueller. One of our former colleagues on this committee accused Mueller of having a vendetta against President Trump because he fired James Comey. Mr. Rosenstein, do you believe that he has a vendetta against the president?
No, I do not.
I would just conclude that this little walk through this 1 year in American history makes it impossible to understand how it is that my colleagues on the other side continue to launch attacks not only against reporters, against the FBI, against the special counsel, but they do so to throw dirt on this story, to make it try to go away. They may want to bury their heads in the sand, but Mr. Chairman, I want to make clear that they will not bury the rule of law in the United States of America, and I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Gowdy.
And good day. I'm Andrea Mitchell in New York. We have been watching the House Judiciary Committee hearing with Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. NBC Justice correspondent Pete Williams joins me now. Pete, first of all, Rod Rosenstein is in charge of the Mueller probe, and he is being queried by Republicans intensively about whether there are conflicts of interest or bias or any other issues involving that probe. And he's been pushing back very strongly. You want to recap it?
Well, right. He's generally been, without getting into specifics, defending Mueller's investigation. He says he's seen no good cause to fire Mueller, that he's not aware of any impropriety in the special counsel's investigation. He also said he's had no orders from President Trump or anyone else to fire Mueller. And he says there's been no indication that Trump has asked him to remove Mueller or to initiate any specific investigations. A lot of the questions today, Andrea, are about previously known but not known in detail text messages exchanged between an FBI agent who was working on the Mueller team and was dismissed by Mueller in July, and an FBI lawyer who also worked briefly on the Mueller investigation. The bulk of those texts is highly critical of Donald Trump and also praises Hillary Clinton. And so the question has been, did that mean that there was bias in the investigation? What Mr. Rosenstein has said here is that there's a difference between expressing political views and bias in the investigation. He says he and Mueller have talked about this and have tried to make sure that everybody's behaving properly. The same question has arisen, not just at this hearing, but hearings before. Many Republicans on the committee concerned that about 9 of the lawyers who are working for Robert Mueller have contributed to Democratic causes in the past, either the Obama or Clinton campaigns or the Democratic Party in general, and Rosenstein again has given a similar answer there.
Thanks so much, Pete Williams. We'll continue to monitor this and, of course, return to live coverage. when warranted. Now, of course, the latest reaction to an historic election in Alabama, where Doug Jones became the first Alabama Democrat elected to the Senate in 25 years. A stunning victory that seemed unthinkable only a few weeks ago. But the sexual misconduct allegations against Roy Moore, first revealed by the Washington Post, caught fire, energizing Democrats and raising doubts among some Republican women about Moore's qualifications for office. Today, President Trump is trying to explain why the two candidates he endorsed for this seat in the Republican primary and now the general election both lost. A huge defeat for the White House and for Steve Bannon.
Folks, I got to tell you, I think that I have been waiting all my life, and now I just don't know what the hell to say.
Realize when the vote is this close that it's not over. And we've still got to go by the rules about this recount provision. And that's what we've got to do, is wait on God and let this process play out.
Huge turnout yesterday, and that's because the Democrats hustled.
Every Republican in the country this morning needs to wake up and fear for their political lives.
You know, strange to say, I guess, from my side of the aisle, but I thought it was a great night for America.
I think probably some of the happiest people in America today are the Republicans in the Senate.
New Jersey Democratic Senator Cory Booker joins me now, who campaigned for Doug Jones. First of all, Senator, this is an historic election, clearly, and there was a very high African-American turnout, 29% according to exit polls. To what do you attribute Doug Jones' victory and Roy Moore's defeat? Was this a one-off because Roy Moore was such a damaged candidate?
No, well, first of all, victory has many parents, as you know, and there are many people that should feel good about themselves. Most importantly, Alabamans. They were the instigators. They were the drivers. I spent a lot of time on the field, a lot of time talking on radio, visiting churches, college campuses. This was an extraordinary grassroots effort by a lot of folks that were working on the field, not just for weeks, but for months, even before these allegations came out. And when I was down there, I was calling back to people here in the Senate and telling them this is not a campaign. This has a movement feel to it. And so I give a lot of praise to the people that really poured their heart, energy, and soul into this election. But I do want to say that this isn't a left-right election. There are a lot of Republicans that defected because they knew that this wasn't about left or right. This was about right or wrong. And that was something that was very affirming to me. There's got to be a level of decency in this country that I know is our nation, is America. And this was a choice between someone who is about bigotry, about hate, about misogyny, that was violating the law, the rule of law. I mean, his career is a stain on the ideals that we hold precious. And so many Republicans rejected that, including my colleague, Richard Shelby, who has a profile of courage for him to come out days before the election as strongly as he did. So this is a moment that I feel this institution, the Senate, has been protected, but more importantly, the values of America have been affirmed in the state of Alabama, and everyone in that state should feel very proud about themselves.
Now, the allegations against Roy Moore, including the allegation from Lee Corfman, who was 14 years old at the time that she claims that he had inappropriate contact with her, which was basically child molestation. Those were much more extreme than the allegations against your colleague, Al Franken. So if we're in the middle of a revolution here on standards, what are the rules? Was it appropriate for Al Franken to be basically fired from his entire political career based on the groping allegations?
Well, there are behaviors that just cannot be acceptable in our country anymore. And clearly there are courts, rules, due process. But what are our societal standards? And I'm one of these people that says all of us should be accepting responsibility for allowing a climate in our country where millions and millions of women have had to endure these despicable conditions, realities at their workplaces, from diners to to office spaces to the halls of power. And we should not tolerate that anymore. And that's really, I think, where we are, where this is very important purge and a demanding that things never go back to normal, that we create a new normal. And you're right to make distinctions. I think it's important to ask about the behavior of individuals. Clearly, Al Franken did the right thing, but this really does cast a shadow on those people like the President of the United States, who's had more compelling fact patterns against him and his behavior that is despicable, that is unacceptable in American society, and something that we should reject. The President of the United States should examine what's going on right now and should do the right thing himself and resign.
Well, the other argument, the counter argument from the White House is that the voters had all those facts in front of them after the Access Hollywood tape, and they elected him anyway.
Well, again, I think that what we need to understand here is that we are in a new time in American history where we now understand, rightfully, there's a movement afoot that this is not tolerable in the United States of America right now. And I understand that argument, but I hear that argument, but I don't accept that argument. The reality is we have a clear and compelling fact pattern that the President of the United States has habitually sexually harassed people. We have over a dozen of those stories, has bragged about it, has literally told us what he did, like walking in on pageant contestants while they were in a significant state of undress. I mean, these things are disgusting. These things are unacceptable in American society, and there should be more voices coming out calling for the president to resign.
So is the new standard a zero-tolerance standard of any allegations, including anonymous allegations, such as some of the more the final ones against Franken? Zero tolerance, including anonymous allegations, for any behavior, including behavior before someone's in politics or elected to office?
Well, again, I don't want to, when you say things like anonymous allegations, clearly, as a guy who's worked in the realm of criminal justice reform, who has seen false allegations made and people trumped up charges, and many folks, African Americans and others, be wrongfully convicted. I'm a person that believes that there should be a process, that there should be due process. But we also have an environment in this country where women have not been believed, where their experiences have been delegitimized, where there's been a climate of fear coming forward. And so, again, I think you should look at various cases and evaluate what they are, and there should be some kind of process. But when it comes to situations like the President of the United States, I mean, come on. There are clear and compelling evidence. There is a president himself speaking towards doing this behavior. There are numbers of over a dozen women that have come forward. And so that's why I have such, I was in pain the day of listening to Al Franken's remarks, because he was right when he talked about the irony of what he is doing the right thing and stepping down from his position voluntarily. And you have a president of the United States sitting there where there is a message being sent to Americans, to young men, to young women, that the highest office in the land, a guy sitting there can get away with doing this behavior. And I find that utterly unacceptable. And we've gotten to the point in America where in other areas of such bad behavior, we wouldn't accept it. We wouldn't accept if dozens of people came forward and said, this person has called me the N-word consistently over time. We wouldn't accept it in the kind of anti-Semitism. But some reason for misogyny, for sexual harassment, we seem to have a different tolerance level in this country. And I refuse to accept that, especially knowing the damage that's done as a former mayor about domestic violence, rape in this country, sexual assault in this country, the pervasiveness of it. This has got to stop. We cannot be a nation that tolerates this level of violence, this level of harassment towards women, where so many women, millions of women, have these stories, truthful stories about their experiences.
Senator Cory Booker, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And to the White House, which has been responding to all of this. We have breaking news from the White House. Kristen Welker is there. Kristen?
Andrea, a little bit of breaking news on tax reform, in fact, which, of course, the scope of that has been changed in the wake of that Alabama Senate race. White House officials hoping that defeat of Roy Moore overnight will add urgency to Republicans to act on the tax bill. According to our own Peter Alexander, a White House official confirms that House and Senate leaders have reached an agreement in principle on their sweeping tax package. This official says they're hoping to have a vote in the Senate first, then the House, with the bill finished ultimately by Wednesday. Now, that is an ambitious timeline, and I want to stress the fact that this is a deal in principle. So that means that it's not quite across the finish line yet. We know that the president is having lunch with a bicameral group of lawmakers from the Senate and the House. He is trying to nail down the final details, Andrea, and a group of reporters have just been called back. So hopefully we're going to get a little bit more information on what specifically this deal entails. We know that the broad outlines include lowering the corporate tax rate as well as limiting the number of tax brackets. There was some real concern, though, that this could not only hurt the middle class, but ultimately add to the deficit. So those are issues that they're trying to hammer out and fix. But meanwhile, Andrea, this obviously, again, goes against the backdrop of that stinging defeat for the Republican Party in Alabama overnight. President Trump trying to save face with a lot of finger pointing here behind the scenes. He tweeted earlier today, if last night's election proved anything, it proved that we need to put up great Republican candidates to increase the razor-thin margins in both the House and Senate. He's also pointed out throughout the day that he didn't back Roy Moore during the primary. This was Steve Bannon's candidate, Andrea, and so there are a lot of people pointing the finger at Steve Bannon as well, who has said that he's waging a war against the establishment. Source close to Steve Bannon says despite all of the calls for him to essentially drop this war that he's waging against the establishment, he's not going to do that. A source close to Bannon says he's just getting started with that war. One more point I'll make, Andrea. The communications director for the Office of Public Liaison, Omarosa Manigault, has resigned, according to the White House. There are some rumblings that there may be more to that, and so we're trying to drill down on what specifically is behind her departure, Andrea.
And in fact, some of our Yamiche Alcindor, who's of course an MSNBC contributor, is reporting, as are some other correspondents, that she in fact was let go, was fired by John Kelly yesterday. And so they are putting out that she is leaving on her own, but that in fact this is another White House firing or staff shakeup from the new chief of staff, Kristen.
Andrea, there have been a number of high-level departures in this first year of the Trump presidency, and this certainly adds to it. Omarosa was undoubtedly one of the most well-known top officials here within the administration. She, of course, was a former Apprentice star from the president's former reality TV show. She was really charged with a lot of the outreach to the African-American community. She was working on securing more funding for historically black colleges, for example. That was her big project. She was in Mississippi over the weekend when President Trump went for the opening of that Civil Rights Museum there in Jackson. There was no indication over the weekend. I saw her, I spoke to her, that she was on her way out. So it would stand to reason that at least some people here are surprised by this departure. And Andrea, as you point out, there is reporting that she was in fact fired by Chief of Staff John Kelly, who, as you know, came into office and essentially said he's going to clean house. He was behind the ouster of Steve Bannon, for example. So we're trying to drill down on all of those details. But this is a pretty high-level departure here at the White House as we approach the holidays and end of the year, Andrea.
Kristen Welker with all the news from the White House. Thank you so much. And joining me now is MSNBC political analyst and former Republican National Committee Chairman Michael Steele, NBC senior political editor Mark Murray, and Washington Post national political reporter Robert Costa, moderator of Washington Week on PBS, and NBC's Vaughn Hilliard in Alabama. Robert Costa, first to you, just to drill down on the tax package. We know that the House and Senate had different packages, but do we know where they ended up in terms of the corporate rate and the individual rates? They were talking about moving up to 21% corporate rate to try to get a little bit more revenue because they had spent so much money elsewhere, and also lowering the individual rates. Not sure whether they had the money to do that, up against this ceiling of $1.5 trillion deficit in order to get it passed with only 50 votes, not 60 votes. That's been the framework of the Budget Act. Robert?
Andrea, here at the Capitol, details have yet to emerge, but it is clear, talking to lawmakers on both sides of the Capitol, that a deal has emerged. It's a handshake deal, and lawmakers cautioned me in the last hour that they still need to hammer out some of these details about the corporate rate, the rate for high-income households over the coming weeks. What they wanted to do today in the wake of Alabama, they tell me, is to come up with some kind of handshake agreement to start moving this toward the floor, because Democrat Doug Jones is going to be sworn in, and they want to move before then.
Well, Robert, when we're talking about this tax bill, now, first of all, Mitch McConnell was saying over the weekend on the talk shows, well, we've had many hearings. Well, in fact, they haven't had hearings. They've had markups, which are not hearings. So this is the fastest I've ever seen any kind of legislation this big. Michael Steele, what about rushing it through conference this quickly in a handshake deal? We still don't know what's in it.
Well, we don't know what's in it, and the reality of it is we are doing exactly what we criticize Democrats doing with Obamacare. The difference is that was a real process. It was a lot of time in which that was vetted out, and Republicans were balking at that process at the time. So this stands in stark relief as something that is outside of the normal, process. Everyone's talking about regular order. We want to do this the right way. You have leadership talking about, we've been doing this for 4 years. No, you haven't. And the American people know that. And at the end of the day, they're going to rush through a bill because now they've lost a seat in Alabama. They definitely don't want to do this with Jones coming in the door to have a vote. They want to get it done. They want to get it to the president's desk so they can, slap each other on the back and say, look what we did. Let's get ready to go win elections next year. But unfortunately, the American people, I think, are paying a lot more attention to this, and the numbers don't add up. And a lot of folks are going to realize those tax cuts they're talking about go away after a certain period of time. They're permanent for corporations. They're not permanent for individuals and the middle class, and I think it's going to be a hard sell to the American people next year.
And Mark Murray, master of all things politics, our deputy political director, let's talk about what people really want. The Republicans now will be able to say, assuming they've got the votes to pass this, that they've passed something for Christmas. The president will go on social media. It'll be extolled as a middle-class tax package. But all of the data that we've seen, talking to independent analysts at the Committee for a Responsible Public Budget, Federal Budget, is that it's not a middle-class tax package at all.
Yeah, Andrea, even despite that policy debate, you ended up looking what happened in Alabama last night, and in passing a potentially tax legislation, I don't think ends up really impacting at all what the midterm environment looks like, which is already really baked in, Andrea. And, if you want to kind of look through some of the exit polls that happened in Alabama, of all places, we're not talking about Virginia, but in Alabama, you look at the coalition for Doug Jones. He ended up winning 96% of African-American voters, 7 in 10 moderates. You had more than 6 in 10 of people who were under the age of 45, and then 57% of women. And then, Andrea, I'll just kind of point to, looking at how President Trump fared in Alabama. His approval rating was split, 48% approve, 48% disapprove. When you break down those numbers on an intensity factor, you see 41% strongly disapprove versus 32% who strongly approved. And in Alabama, to me, that is a stunning number and a really rough sign of Republicans going into the midterms, regardless if they pass this tax legislation or not.
Vaughn Hilliard is down in Alabama. Vaughn, I was very struck by the fact that Doug Jones, with his victory announcement last night, his big celebration, was talking about economic issues, talking about the sort of kitchen table issues that many people feel the Democrats failed to communicate in the 2016 campaign.
Andrea, he's tried to take the approach in this campaign over the last month, despite attempts to, essentially prod him on different issues outside of those, whatever, he calls them kitchen tables issues, healthcare, education, the economy. And he stayed focused on those messages, saying that not only did it play towards the white population here in Alabama, but he said also to African Americans here. African Americans turned out made up 30% of the electorate yesterday. I was talking with, at one point, at Tuscaloosa County, I think, is one of those counties worth looking at, where the University of Alabama, it's been a long time traditional conservative place. But Doug Jones went there a week ago Sunday. He visited 9 different churches in the area, Andrea. They had a field operation. I went in and stopped into the office. They were canvassing, phone banking. The organizers there told me, though, that they were targeting Democrats. They were targeting those African-American voters because they believed that they could turn them out. It would be enough to catalyze if they were also able to get those Republican crossover voters, that was able to get them over there. I was talking to a reverend out in Tuscaloosa County there, and he said that there were two factors in play. He said, yes, there was frustration with President Trump, with Roy Moore, in his comments here just this last week that were made public about the family ties were stronger back during slavery. But he said the second factor was that Doug Jones made a play for black voters on radio. He went into churches. He talked about these issues that were important to them on social media, that he made an effort, unlike he said that they saw a year ago with Hillary Clinton, to actually galvanize and give them a reason to come out. Andrea?
And back to Michael Steele, when we're talking about the tax package, is that going to be enough to lift the Republican Party? Will they be able to sell it? Because the real impact of it won't be felt for a while. So can't they describe it any way they want, especially the president, in speeches and in social media?
Oh, yeah, they will describe it all kinds of ways. And you're absolutely right. The full impact of that, or even just the beginning impact of it, won't be felt until you get into 2019, for example. So they're going to make the noise about the tax package, and it's not going to be, I think to Mark's point, it's not going to be an offset for the underlying rot, if you will, that is occurring within the GOP. On race, with women, sexual harassment, the types of candidates that we've endorsed. And remember, Steve Bannon is still out there talking about a war on the leadership. Donald Trump isn't backing away from that. He may say, oh, I didn't, Roy Moore wasn't my candidate. Yes, he was. He was your candidate. I got the robocall to prove it. So, you can say what you want to say. You can lie as much as you want, but the facts are still what they are for a lot of voters out there, that they're looking at the GOP now, not suspiciously, but with a sense of, we don't want to be a part of that. And that's a problem for the party. It's a long way from where we were when I was chairman back in 2010. The ground that we've lost here could be incalculable for the RNC and the GOP next year.
And Robert Costa, what is the reaction inside the White House? Do they realize just how bad this defeat was, that no matter what they do on taxes, that they're going to have a real midterm problem? Or is there a big blame game going on as to who dragged the president back into this with the robocalls and with the speech in Pensacola last Friday night?
They're well aware of the stakes in Alabama, and there are two fronts they're concerned about. Talking to them last night and this morning, people close to the president, they say, one, a 51-49 Senate makes it much more difficult to pass legislation in 2018. If they're going to try to gin up momentum in 2018, it's going to be harder to do that. And the other issue they're facing is a revived Democratic Party that's bringing up the issue of sexual harassment and the allegations against President Trump. And he was able to win election last year in spite of those allegations against him. But now those allegations are again at the fore of our national conversation, and they're grappling with that challenge.
Thanks so much, Robert Costa and Michael Steele. Stay with us. We'll be right back. More on the big breaking news that there is an agreement, a handshake at least, with the finance chairman, Orrin Hatch, confirming that there is an agreement on taxes between the House and Senate, and votes are being scheduled for next week in both houses, including presumably final passage. We'll be right back.
Good questions lead to good answers. Our advisors can help you find both. Talk to one today and see why we're bullish on the future. Yours.
Patrick woke up with back pain, but he has work to do, so he took a leave. If he'd taken Tylenol, he'd be stopping for more pills right now. Only Aleve has the strength to stop tough pain for up to 12 hours with just one pill. Aleve, all day strong.
Your vision benefits are about to expire, so it's time to use them. VisionWorks accepts hundreds of plans, including Davis Vision. And you'll get 50% off a second pair of glasses when you use your insurance. Time is running out, so use your vision benefits at VisionWorks.
She's nationally recognized for her compassion and care. He spent decades fighting to give families a second chance. But to help others, they first had to protect themselves.
I have AFib. Even for a nurse, it's complicated, and it puts me at a higher risk of stroke.
That would be devastating. I had to learn all I could to help protect myself.
Once I got the facts, my doctor and I chose Xarelto.
Xarelto, to help keep me protected.
Once daily Xarelto, a latest generation blood thinner, significantly lowers the risk of stroke in people with AFib not caused by a heart valve problem. It has similar effectiveness to warfarin.
Xarelto works differently.
Warfarin interferes with at least 6 blood clotting factors. Xarelto is selective, targeting just one critical factor, interacting with less of your body's natural blood clotting function. For AFib patients well managed on warfarin, there is limited information on how Xarelto compares in reducing the risk of stroke. Don't stop taking Xarelto without talking to your doctor, as this may increase risk of stroke. While taking, you may bruise more easily or take longer for bleeding to stop. It may increase your risk of bleeding if you take certain medicines. Xarelto can cause serious and in rare cases fatal bleeding. Get help right away for unexpected bleeding, unusual bruising, or tingling. If you've had spinal anesthesia, watch for back pain or any nerve or muscle-related signs or symptoms. Do not take Xarelto if you have an artificial heart valve or abnormal bleeding. Tell your doctor before all planned medical or dental procedures and before starting Xarelto about any conditions such as kidney, liver, or bleeding problems.
It's important to learn all you can
To help protect yourself from a stroke.
Talk to your doctor about Xarelto. There's more to know.
Merry Christmas.
Why are there so many miles on it?
What?
For great offers, visit your local Jaguar retailer during the Unwrap a Jaguar sales event.
Tomorrow's headlines before they go to print.
What would your lead be about this event at the White House?
Tomorrow's questions before anyone's asked them.
How far is this from normal?
Tomorrow's conversation tonight.
As you delicately put it, this is a president who plays whack-a-mole rather than chess.
I don't think there was any strategy here.
The 11th hour with Brian Williams. More than the day that was, it's the day that will be.
It is never boring around here.
The 11th hour, weeknights at 11 on MSNBC.
And with continuing breaking news, joining us now, NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Casey Hunt on the agreement between House and Senate on taxes. Excuse me. Out of breath with all the news today. Tell us if you have any details at all on schedule, on content, what's in it. We don't know. When will the votes be?
Andrea, we're still getting a sense. We know that this is a deal that's been made in principle, that both the House and the Senate have agreed to this. We're expecting at some point a joint statement from the Finance Committee chairman and Kevin Brady, the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee. Over on the House side, Senator Hatch's office confirming to our Frank Thorpe that this deal has been reached, and Peter Alexander at the White House reporting that the White House says that this is the case. So we're still learning about the details of what's in it. We have a general idea of, kind of where the problem areas were. They've been talking about where to set the corporate rate, perhaps 21%, how to handle pass-through businesses, and some other things. So we're going to look for that statement for all of the finalized details as this unfolds today. But this does come out, this news broke before that public conference meeting that's supposed to happen this afternoon, and before the lunch at the White House with the president and these conferees. So I think there was a little bit of frustration that this came out before they took that public step to kind of show that they were having these negotiations. But the reality is, for most conference committees, the work very rarely takes place around a table that the public gets a glimpse of. This is a lot of horse trading kind of behind the scenes. So how this plays out next, the thinking is that the Senate would vote first on this, and our initial thinking had been that that would happen early next week, probably Monday. It's not clear that they would have time to get this finished this week on the Senate side, with other business and requirements about the bill being posted publicly for 48 hours. So we're still checking in with leadership to see if there's been any change on that front. But if they proceed as planned, they would go take this deal to the Senate floor likely on Monday, and that would set up a vote in the House later in the week. And this, of course, all sets them up to send the bill to the president before Christmas. Right now, they are scheduled to be here next week. They have to reach a spending deal before of some kind, even if it's a short-term one, before the end of the week. Next Friday is December 22nd. That's where funding runs out. And, of course, Sunday is Christmas Eve. The following Monday, Christmas Day, that is when the president has promised promised that he's going to send this tax bill, sign this tax bill. He has said it's going to be a Christmas present for the American people. Right now, that timeline seems to be holding for Republicans in Congress. Democratic leader Chuck Schumer said this morning that because of the results in Alabama, Republicans should hold off. They should wait until Jones is able to be seated before this vote is held. That is, of course, what Mitch McConnell called for when Scott Brown was elected in Massachusetts, in a scenario that some are comparing to what happened in Alabama last night. But so far, there's no indication that McConnell is going to slow down this process. And it looks like this is something, a massive rewrite of our tax code. It's going to affect every American business, every American family, likely to be done before Christmas. Andrea.
And the question is it a Christmas gift or a lump of coal in people's stockings? That remains to be seen. But bring us up to date also on the players involved, because what we know is that Mark Dayton, the Minnesota governor, appointed an Al Franken replacement who will have to run next year in
Senator
2018. Did I lose
yes,
Casey?
Andrea, I apologize. Go ahead.
No, that's okay.
I'm still here.
It was Senator Flake, and you were trying to grab him. My question is, who's on first? Okay, so a new Minnesota senator has been named, but not sworn in yet. Al Franken has said he's resigning, but has not physically left. But the big unknown is Doug Jones, which would be a flip of a seat and one fewer Republican. And it's very clear to you, I would assume, that Mitch McConnell is not going to let him be sworn in time to vote on the tax bill.
Well, and that was the thinking in the event that Roy Moore.
Right.
Right, exactly. And I mean, and that's not a departure from what they were saying before this, regardless of who had actually won this seat. They were planning on, assuming, and McConnell said on Tuesday, that they had been planning to vote with Luther Strange in office through the end of this session. So, to a certain extent, that's not a surprise or a change. There, of course, was one Republican who voted against this before, Senator Bob Corker, because of concerns about the deficit. Once Jones is seated, he'll only have that one seat to lose. He's been in a position where he could lose 2 votes and then bring Mike Pence up here to cast a tie-breaking vote and still pass legislation. So in theory, they could still pass the tax bill even with Jones seated. However, there have been some questions about Senator Susan Collins, for example. Is she getting what she wants in this bill? She seems to still be on board with it, but has also said if the negotiations don't go the way she wants them to, she reserves the right to vote against it. So it makes it a riskier proposition, obviously, to wait. I think Democrats would also argue that the longer that this tax bill is out in the open, the more people will be able to poke holes in it, the more that the polling might actually matter more in the national debate. So far, we just haven't seen kind of the mobilization against this that we saw around health care. And you combine that with, the Republican desire to get this done from a political perspective. And here we are with them pushing this through to the end of the year. So, again, I would be shocked if Mitch McConnell delayed this bill past the end of the year. Andrea.
Thanks so much, Casey. If you can stand by, we're going to bring back MSNBC political analyst, former Republican National Chairman Michael Steele, NBC senior political editor Mark Murray, Washington Post national political reporter Robert Costa, moderator of Washington Week on PBS. And joining us now, Yamiche Alcindor, New York Times congressional correspondent and MSNBC contributor. First, Yamiche, I wanted to ask you about this new departure from the White House staff, a pretty significant one, and with Omarosa leaving, claiming that she's resigning because it'll be a year, but I think your reporting is that she was really fired by the chief of staff.
Well, there are sources that are very familiar with this departure who have said that she was let go, that General Kelly moved to essentially say that she should no longer be working at the White House. But there are also sources that are very close to her who say that she's telling people that she left voluntarily. They say that she always wanted to leave after a year. That the president's comments on Charlottesville and other things have really made her have a lot of criticism. She's faced a lot of booing crowds and hissing, and that she essentially wanted to leave because the job got too hard. Whatever it is, the idea is that Omarosa was definitely someone who was seen as polarizing. She was seen as someone who other people in the White House didn't like, but she was also someone who President Trump really liked. He was very loyal to the president. He gave her a good salary. He gave her access to the White House and access to his office before General Kelly shut that down and shut her out and a couple other people out. So there's this idea that President Trump would have to, I think, have been involved in these talks for her to leave. So as a reporter, I'm finding it kind of hard to believe that she would have been completely ousted without President Trump at least talking to her because of their relationship that goes back to The Apprentice.
And Robert Costa, from your reporting as well, this is another sign of General Kelly sort of not only cleaning house, but also trying to establish some discipline in this White House.
Omarosa was a confidant. Omarosa Manigault was a confidant of President Trump going back to her time on reality television. And she is indicative of a trend within Trump's inner circle. The president has seen some of his confidants and allies from his business days, the campaign days, fade away as the presidency has unfolded, not for necessarily personal animus or problems with the president, but because General Kelly has installed a new order inside of the West Wing. And if you defer from that order at all, you're at risk of being urged just to go to the door, or maybe you just start to rethink your own job.
And Mark Murray, if you're still there, we understand that the pool is about to come out, but they did get a couple of questions to the president. The president was meeting with the conferees on taxes from both houses, and apparently told the pool, and we'll get it all and play it back in full coming up, that he's happy with the agreement. Didn't indicate which way they're going on those rates, or at least we don't know that. And when asked about the results in Alabama, said that he's okay with it because some Republicans are okay with it. This despite the fact that he was very aggressive in his late endorsement and campaigning across the border in Florida and robocalling on behalf of Roy Moore. So this is two defeats for him in the primary and the general, with two different candidates in the same Senate race.
Absolutely, Andrea. You know, you think about the beginning of the Trump presidency, and there was good news for the Republican Party. You ended up looking at their win in that Georgia congressional special election, where the Republicans ended up winning. They won in Montana, they won in Kansas, they won in South Carolina, and there was this kind of sense of President Trump is bulletproof in a lot of these contests. But what we ended up seeing last month in Virginia, last month in New Jersey, and then certainly the really bombshell result last night in Alabama, and this is a president who is now on a losing streak. But when I look at the totality of all of these races, Andrea, starting with that Georgia race on to Alabama, and you end up seeing that Democrats are overperforming, or where they did in 2016 or the most recent election in that congressional district or in that state. And to me, that all ends up creating the signs of what is likely to be a big wave in 2018 for Democrats. That doesn't mean that it's a guarantee that Democrats are going to take back the House or even the United States Senate. But if you ended up holding those midterm elections tomorrow, Democrats would have a pretty good night on given everything that we've seen across the country this year.
And before that we get that tape rolled by the TV pool, I just want to recap something reported by the Associated Press on the details of the rates that have been set. Michael Steele, follow me here. The corporate rate, 21%, not the 20 that the president asked for, not the 22 that some had suggested to bring that deficit down. The personal rate, the top rate, going from 39.6 to 37%. So this is good for the wealthiest Americans. And among the tax breaks, they agreed that homeowners can deduct interest on the first $750,000 of a new mortgage, and that's down from the current rate of $1 million. But still, it looks like no benefit at all on the state and local taxes. So that is sort of a summary. We're about 15 seconds away from seeing this video from the president. Michael Steele, some final thoughts there?
Yeah, just real quick on that. I mean, I still think that the state and local tax issue is going to be a big one for those big states that also have Republican governors.
And here's the president.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate it. And I'll be also speaking at 3 o'clock today, a little bit more about what's happening with this incredible journey and what we're doing with regard to bringing down taxes, the largest tax cut ever. But I appreciate you being here today. I want to thank the incredible members of the House and Senate who have been working so hard. We're very, very close to a historic legislative victory, the likes of which rarely has this country seen. I think I can say, Kevin and Orrin, that we're getting very close, and I know a lot of the folks that we'd like to have here. We said, if you have your choice, stay back and get it done, right? They're all working and negotiating some final points, but we're very, very close. This bill is vital to the American people for many reasons. First of all, it's going to have a tax cut, the likes of which we haven't seen for not only business, but for the working families of our country. It's really a tax cut based on jobs and also very good for companies, which also means jobs. The typical family of four earning $75,000 will see an income tax cut of $2,000. So that's $2,000 in their pocket, additional to spend on whatever they want to spend, or they could save the money also. You do have a lot of families. In the old days, they saved money, but they will be saving it in many cases. Second, the bill is going to cut taxes for American businesses, both big ones and small ones, so that they can grow higher and compete all around the world. Right now, they're paying 35%, and that's the highest in the industrialized world, in many cases by far. And we'll be bringing that down to a number that will be extremely impressive to a lot of people. I don't think I'll give them the surprise yet, Kevin, right? So
Yes,
maybe
sir.
I'll hold the surprise, but I think you'll be very happy with it. I think the businesses will be very happy, and we'll be able to compete all over the world. Third, we're simplifying our broken system. It's so complicated that nobody can figure it out. Tax returns that are very, very big and large, and they have to go out and hire companies to do them. So we're fixing the system. And finally, the plan's going to bring trillions of dollars back into the United States, money that's offshore. And you've been hearing me say $2.5 trillion for years. Well, the 2.5 has grown, and it's going to be a lot more than that, probably $4 trillion. It could even be higher than that. We don't even know. It's so much money, we don't even know how much it is. But you look at the great companies, Apple and so many others, they have billions of dollars overseas that they want to bring back. Now they're going to be able to bring it back, and we'll be spending that money, and they'll be spending that money right here, and it'll be jobs and lots of other good things. While the media has focused on the differences between the House and the Senate bills, I can only tell you that we have very, very talented representatives right here, and I think I can say, Orrin, that we're very close, right? We're very, very close.
We'll get it done.
And I want to thank Senator Orrin Hatch. He's been incredible, and Kevin Brady, incredible. You guys have been just really, really amazing. Although I should save that until we sign. Let's have that. You know, we've been there too many times. Let's get the vote first, right? But I want to thank my whole team, Gary and Steve and everybody. The whole team has been really something special. And Diane, thank you very much for everything. We appreciate it. So we're very close to getting it done. We're very close to voting. And our economy, as you know, has surged from where it is when I took it over. We were having an economy that was going in the wrong direction. They can say all they want about the last administration or even administrations. This country was going in the wrong direction from the economic standpoint. And